In this episode, we're going to get a guided tour of Fayette State Park, and then we're going to take a dinghy ride.
This is Mark, and I'm Lori, and we love sailing the Bay of Green Bay. Every year, we look for new places to visit and explore. This year, we decided we wanted to go to Fayette, Michigan, and stay at the state park for a few days. We planned a 200-mile, 10-day sailing trip that'll take us around the entire bay. We try to put out new videos every couple weeks, so hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode.
Quite a view.
Welcome to Fayette Historical State Park.
Just came back from the showers. And good thing we got there when we did, because apparently the power is out, and they have solar tubes in the ceiling, but there's also lights and they weren't lit up. And the ranger came by and he locked the bathrooms out because the power was out as soon as we got out of there. So.
Oh, I'm so glad. We really needed a shower.
We beat them.
Yes. There's our boats.
The story of Fayette starts all the way back in 1844, and that's when they found iron in the Upper Peninsula. When they were doing geologic surveys of the area, they found out that their compasses wouldn't work because the magnetic tips were drawn off of true north by the massive iron ranges in the UP. They had to use sun compasses to finish that initial surveying. As we know now, the giant copper ranges, the iron ranges in the state, had a huge mineral wealth, the value of which ended up being greater than the gold rush. So, of course, there was this huge commercial rush to get up there and sort of take advantage of that, and the Jackson Iron Company was one of the first companies to do so. And it wasn't until this iron and steel markets changed during the Civil War that they were able to actually turn a profit and consider diversifying and starting a furnace of their own. Prior to that, they had just been pulling iron ore out of the ground. They were shipping this raw product through the Great Lakes to be made into steel elsewhere. But when they had a little bit of extra money, they were looking at the natural resources here on the Garden Peninsula and other sites, and thinking that they could establish an industrial site to create pig iron, this refined iron product that was really profitable at the time. And so they sent their agent, Fayette Brown, down to the site in 1864, and he was like, "We found the perfect spot." And that's because of three natural resources that we see at Fayette today. So the first one is that harbor behind us, still fabulous for taking in boats, but naturally very deep and protected, and would have been important for bringing in those barges filled with iron ore and sending out ships filled with pig iron, especially on the expanded shipping season that Lake Michigan has compared to the much colder Lake Superior. The second are those dolomite limestone cliffs beyond. They're an excellent building material, as we can see from the foundations of all these buildings and then some full structures on site, but also essential as a flux in those furnace processes. And then our third natural resource is the natural hardwood forest that would have been untouched at the time, and that's really important for making hardwood charcoal, the fuel which ran that furnace complex for the 24 years that it was in operation. So by Christmas Day, 1867, they'd completed the first half of the furnace complex. They put that stack in blast and started smelting pig iron, and that's where we say that the operation of the town site begins. So the way this worked is you had these blast ovens, and these were working to heat the air up 600 to 750 degrees Celsius to be blasted into these stacks. You had boiler rooms that were providing steam for the blowing engines. This is the patent diagram of the blowing engine, so you can see this huge flywheel, and it would be forcing the air into these two furnace stacks at about 2 pounds per square inch. That was important for igniting the contents and also providing oxygen to get that to burn. So you'd have the hot air here, steam here, they'd both be passed into these blowing engine rooms. and it would power that engine. So inside there would have been limestone, charcoal, and iron ore. That charcoal would have burned very, very hot enough to turn the contents of the stack, you know, all the way up, if you see how big those are, into this sort of big molten mass. The impurities in the iron ore would mix with the limestone to create slag, and that floated to the top very conveniently. So furnace workers would skim the slag off the top, wait for it to cool, and then use it to either build roads or level foundations, or just throw it into the harbor. So what they really wanted was that melted metallic iron, and whenever they were ready, they would poke a hole in the bottom of the hearth and it would stream into the sand floor of the casting room. So you can see that those floors are all sand, and they'd stamp these big wooden molds from the mouth of the hearth all the way to the end of the casting house, and the melted iron would run in those long channels all the way down. And so the way that those molds were constructed, it was like one long line with little divots off to the side, and it apparently looked like piglets at a sow. Hence the term pig iron. It's time to talk about why Fayette isn't here, why all these buildings were just abandoned, and why, you know, that furnace complex isn't still making pig iron. And so that's for a few different reasons that started to become obvious in the mid-1880s. It took them only about 20 years to get rid of all of that hardwood, and they were going to have to start shipping in alternate fuels, which sort of defeated the purpose of Fayette being here. And then there were some factors outside of the town that they couldn't really control. Firstly, the price of pig iron had fallen through the floor in the mid-1880s. And then further east, technology for coal and coke-powered furnaces had started to become obviously way, way better than charcoal-powered furnaces. And so this complex was out of date, it was out of fuel, ore was just sitting in sheds, waiting to be sold when it was more profitable. And finally in 1891, the company called it quits. They pulled all the machinery off that furnace complex, they paid someone to tear the railroad up for scrap, and they left. So this town of about 500 people shrunk to maybe 20 really quickly. All you had were people fishing and farming, trying to run the hotel almost all the way up to the Great Depression, or trying to rent out these middle-class homes to tourists.
Okay. Mike and I are going to take the dinghy out and we're going to go around the point, and we're hopefully going to catch the sunset on a time lapse. This is going to be fun. It sounds like a weed eater. If we don't come back in 20 if we don't come back in 20 minutes, come find us and bring gas.
Have fun. Come back safe.
And that's the last we ever saw of them.
Bye, boys. It was fun sailing with you. We'll miss you. But we will take very good care of our boats. And we will have fun.
Yes.
Glory will use this as a racer.
Okay.
And then we will be cruisers on Glorious Day. No boys. Yeah!
So when we came in here, there's a red buoy that red marker that marks the channel going into Fayette. And they always say you go to the red channel and then you aim to shore. Because it don't look like anything when you're coming from the south. It looks like a big wall of rock.
Red right, return.
So you aim for the red marker and then all of a sudden the whole way opens up. Bungees. Alright. I feel like we're literally looking at the underside of a tree, like in the roots section right here. Look at this. I mean, when you look at this tree, it's growing out of the rocks.
Nice.
We got like the roots are digging down and they grew new branches.
That might be one of those 600-year-old trees right there that we saw at the museum.
Maybe. Because there's a main trunk going up right over there.
That is amazing.
That's a cool view of a tree.
It is. You don't see that every day. But we see it today.
Yep, because we have a dinghy.
Guess what?
What?
Glass.
Real glass?
Lake Michigan glass.
Oh, there it is.
Go ahead, Dinghy Ding Dong.
Glorious day, Marina. We're looking for a slip for a 8-foot vessel, 8-inch draft. Over.
No room for you right now. Sorry. Try Washington Island.
10-4.
All right, a little left there for you.
Sorry.
What
What does it taste like?
Chicken.